Okay, so you know that feeling when the lights start flickering and you're like, oh, is this it? Is this the power outage?
Yeah.
Well, imagine that feeling, but amplified because you're in the city
Right.
and a power outage in a city.
Yeah.
It's not just like a minor inconvenience. It can really throw things into chaos, especially if you're not prepared.
Absolutely. And cities are so interconnected, they rely so heavily on that constant flow of electricity that when it's gone, even for a short time, the effects can be pretty dramatic.
Yeah, and that's why we're doing this deep dive today. We're going to look at preparing for power outages in the city, Urban Prepper's Guide,
Okay.
just by the Portuguese prepper. And we're going to try to give you the knowledge to not only survive a city blackout, but to really thrive during one.
One thing that's really interesting about cities is that they face a very unique set of challenges when the power goes out.
Right.
You've got so many people crammed into a small area. They all need the same resources. You've got complicated infrastructure that we all depend on. And then there are even security concerns that can pop up when the lights go out. It's a completely different situation than dealing with a power outage out in the country.
You're right. It's not as simple as, lighting some candles and just waiting it out.
Exactly.
I mean, think about the 2003 blackout in the Northeast. Millions of people were suddenly stuck. Transportation stopped working, resources started running low. It's a real-life example of how fast things can get out of control.
Yeah, and I think those events really highlight how important it is to be prepared as an individual, especially in an urban environment. You have to be able to take care of yourself and your family for at least a few days.
Right. So let's dig into what we actually need to do during a city blackout.
Right.
So obviously everyone knows flashlight batteries.
Right.
But what are some things that people might not think of that are really helpful when you're dealing with a dark city?
A headlamp, I think, is a total game changer.
Okay.
Imagine you're trying to walk down a dark stairwell in your apartment building, and you're trying to hold a flashlight at the same time. A headlamp frees up your hands, makes it much easier to move around safely.
That makes a lot of sense. What about staying informed during an outage? I feel like I use my phone for everything.
Yeah.
What happens when the cell towers are down?
Well, that's when that good old battery-powered radio comes in handy.
Yeah.
It's your connection to the news and weather updates, which are so important for making smart decisions.
You need to know what's going on.
Exactly.
Okay, so what about staying warm, especially if it's cold outside?
Yeah.
What are some good ways to stay comfortable without power?
Layering clothing is a big one.
Yeah.
And those thermal blankets, those silver blankets, those can be surprisingly effective. And then hand warmers are always a good idea, too, if it's really cold.
Yeah.
You might even consider an indoor safe portable heater. Just be super careful using it. Make sure you have good ventilation.
Yeah. Don't want to trade one emergency for another.
Exactly.
Okay, let's talk food and water. I'm guessing canned goods, dry snacks, those freeze-dried meals are all good options.
Yeah, definitely. They're non-perishable and they're really easy to prepare. Even if you don't have power, just don't forget a manual can opener.
Oh, yeah.
You don't want to be stuck with a can of soup and no way to open it.
I've been there and it's not fun.
Yeah. No, it's not.
What about water? How much should we be storing?
A good rule of thumb is at least 1 gallon per person per day.
Okay.
And you should also have a way to filter or purify extra water if you need it.
Right.
A portable filter or some purification tablets can be really helpful if your stored water runs out.
Makes sense.
Oh.
Okay, so we've got light, warm food, water. But what about sanitation? It's not something people usually think about.
Right.
But in a city where everyone's living close together, it can become a problem pretty fast.
It definitely can. It's something a lot of people overlook. Portable toilets are a must-have, especially if you live in an apartment.
Okay.
And then stock up on trash bags and put together a basic hygiene kit. It'll go a long way in keeping things clean and preventing germs from spreading.
Yeah, that's a good point, especially if you're in close quarters with other people.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got a good handle on how to survive a short-term power outage, a day or two.
Right.
But what if the lights are out for longer than that, for days or even weeks? How do we move past just getting by and actually, really do well during a long-term outage in the city?
I think that's when you really need to think about those long-term solutions. You need to have backup systems in place.
Okay, so let's talk about backup systems.
Yeah.
The Portuguese prepper mentions generators, and I always thought those were more of a suburban or rural thing.
Yeah.
Are generators actually practical for someone living in an apartment?
You might be surprised there are actually portable generators now that are a lot smaller and more affordable.
Oh, okay.
They're perfect for an apartment because you can use them to power a few essential things like your refrigerator or then maybe a coffee maker.
So I could still have my morning coffee during a blackout.
Exactly.
That's important.
Hmm.
What about for people who live in houses? Is there a different type of generator for them?
Yeah, for larger homes, a standby generator is probably a better option. They're permanently installed and they automatically turn on when the power goes out.
Okay.
So they can power your whole house. They're a bigger investment, of course. But if you're worried about longer outages, they can really give you peace of mind.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. So generators are an option, but the Portuguese prepper also talks about solar panels, and I always thought those were more for people who lived off the grid, out in the country, not
Right.
something you'd see in the city.
Yeah, it seems a little counterintuitive, but solar panels are becoming more and more common in urban areas, especially with the improvements in battery technology.
Hmm.
You can actually set up your own little power system on your roof so you can have backup power even if the city's grid is down.
Wow, that's really interesting. So we talked about lighting, we talked about power.
Hmm.
What about cooking? I'm not exactly a wilderness chef.
Yeah.
What are my options if I can't use my stove?
Well, you don't have to be a survival expert to cook without power. A
Yeah.
portable propane stove is a good option.
Yeah.
They're pretty easy to use, but you have to use them outside in a well-ventilated area, never indoors.
Right, safety first.
Absolutely. Are there any other cooking options for people who want to be extra prepared or maybe they want to try something different?
Yeah, I mean, are there other ways to cook if you don't have propane or electricity?
There are actually quite a few. You could use an alcohol burner or a solar oven, which uses the sun's energy to cook food.
Okay.
Those might take a little more time and practice, but they're a good way to cook without relying on traditional fuels.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
We've talked about storing water, but what happens if a power outage lasts a long time? Even a big supply of water is going to run out eventually. How do we deal with that?
That's when you have to start thinking outside the box. A rainwater collection system can be a great way to get more water. You can collect rainwater and then filter it, and you've got a sustainable source of water even if the outage lasts a while.
That's a great idea, especially in a city where water can become scarce during an emergency. The Portuguese prepper also talks about joining local prepper groups, and that seems like a really good idea, especially in a city where people can feel isolated sometimes.
Yeah, I think that community aspect is really important. It's not just about sharing resources like generators or finding places to stay. It's about having a network of people who can support each other.
Exactly. It's about that sense of community resilience, knowing that you're not alone in this.
Absolutely. While we're talking about being prepared, I think it's important to talk about some of the common mistakes that people make when they're planning for power outages.
Yeah, it's always good to learn from other people's mistakes, right? So what are some of the things that people often overlook or do wrong?
One of the biggest mistakes is relying too much on technology.
Okay.
We're so used to having all this information and communication at our fingertips that we forget how important it is to have backups for when those systems fail.
That's so true. Our phones and laptops, they're useless without power.
Exactly. And that's when those low-tech options become really important, like that hand crank radio or printed map.
Okay, so don't forget about the basics.
Right. Another common mistake is forgetting about generator safety.
Oh, right.
People don't realize that generators produce carbon monoxide, which is really dangerous. You can't run a generator indoors or in an enclosed space. It has to be outside in a well-ventilated area.
So important, and I'm guessing regular maintenance is important too.
It is just like any other machine generators need to be taken care of, so they'll work when you need them.
So it's not just about having a generator, it's about making sure it's in good working order.
Exactly. What other mistakes do people make when it comes to preparing for power outages?
Yeah, are there any other common pitfalls?
Well, I think the biggest one is just waiting until an outage happens to start preparing.
Oh, yeah.
Procrastination can really hurt you in an emergency. The time to get your supplies, make a plan, and learn those essential skills is now not when the lights go out and everyone's panicking.
It's all about being proactive.
Exactly. And the Portuguese prepper gives some really good advice for how to take action. He breaks it down into 5 steps.
Okay, what are they?
Planning ahead,
Okay.
investing wisely, staying informed, practicing drills, and learning basic repairs.
Okay, let's break those down one by one.
Yeah.
What does planning ahead involve?
Well, you have to start by thinking about what could happen. What would you do if you had to leave your home?
Right.
Are there places you could go, like community shelters? Have you talked to your family and neighbors about how you'll communicate if the phones are down?
So it's about thinking through different scenarios and having a plan for each one.
Exactly. What about investing wisely? Does that mean I need to spend a lot of money on fancy survival gear?
Yeah, what does that really mean?
It's not about spending a ton of money. It's about buying things that are high quality and will last.
Okay,
And it's about choosing tools that can be used for more than one thing. You don't need every gadget out there,
yeah,
just the essentials that will really make a difference.
makes sense.
Yeah.
So what about staying informed? How do we do that?
Sign up for emergency alerts from your city.
Okay.
Pay attention to the weather reports and stay aware of any potential problems in your area. The more you know, the better prepared you'll be.
Knowledge is power.
Exactly. Okay, what about practicing drills? How do we practice for a power outage?
Yeah, I mean, it's not like a fire drill, right?
Well, it's kind of like a fire drill, but for a blackout, you should practice your emergency plan with your family.
Okay.
Make sure everyone knows what they need to do. This will help things run smoothly if there's an actual outage, and you'll be able to spot any problems with your plan.
So practice makes perfect.
Exactly. And finally, let's talk about learning basic repairs. Do I need to become an electrician or a plumber?
Yeah, I'm not exactly handy. What kind of repairs are we talking about?
You don't have to be a professional, but learning a few basic things like how to reset a circuit breaker or fix a leaky faucet can be really helpful.
Okay.
And knowing how to use a generator properly is important too.
So it's about being able to handle those little emergencies that might come up.
Exactly. And that brings us back to that idea of self-reliance and being resourceful, which are so important when you're prepping for anything.
You know, as we've been going through all this advice from the Portuguese prepper, I'm realizing that being ready for a power outage, it's not just about, stocking up on stuff.
Yeah, it's really about changing your mindset. It's about looking at things differently so you feel like you can handle whatever happens.
Right. It's about that self-reliance and resourcefulness that we've been talking about.
Exactly.
And that sense of community, too. Knowing that even if things get tough, we can adapt and we can help each other out.
And I think that brings us to one of the biggest takeaways from all of this. Being prepared, it doesn't mean you're living in fear.
Right.
It's about taking control, in a world that can feel really unpredictable.
I like that it's not about hiding and waiting for something bad to happen.
Right.
It's about giving ourselves the knowledge and the tools so we can handle any situation.
Exactly. And even doing small things to prepare can make a big difference. It could be as simple as putting a headlamp in your emergency kit or talking to your family about what you'd do if the power went out.
Those little things can really add up and give you peace of mind and make you more resilient, and not just for you, but for your community too.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with a question to think about.
So
What's one thing you can do this week to get a little more prepared?
it could be anything.
Yeah.
Maybe buy some extra water or learn how to reset your circuit breaker.
Right.
Whatever it is, make that commitment to yourself and to your community.
And let us know what you're going to do. Leave a comment down below, and let's inspire each other to be more prepared and more resilient.
Yeah, let's build a stronger city together, one that can handle whatever comes our way.
Exactly.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into urban power outage preparedness.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
Remember, knowledge is power, and being prepared gives you peace of mind.
Stay curious, stay informed, and stay prepared.
We'll see you next time on the deep dive.